You know, I want to ask too, Jen, about the inflection beyond just the overall dynamic level of a phrase. Because when I listen to the concert, I notice that, you know, phrases end nicely. I mean, not only in terms of, you know, slight slowing of the tempo, but also the dynamic shape, you know, lends something. So how did you get them to think like that? Because they do it so consistently. This is certainly something that they generalize. It's not that you taught them to do that in every piece. I mean, they now understand that principle, and so how did you do that?
Well, I mean, all the small inflections that you're going to add to a note, and you know, when you're going to retard on to maybe slightly or take a little extra time with the section, that stuff's extremely hard to, you know, teach a kid with a blackboard and a marker and tell them all the rules of music. So the thing that I've done, which has helped me the most in teaching my kids how to be musical, is by being musical myself. There is not any class period ever in any day that I will not play an instrument for the students, and it will always be the instrument that they're playing in class. From the, you know, woodwind class, I'm going to have woodwind instruments that I play for them. Trumpet class, I'm going to play trumpet. Low brass class, and percussion, I'm going to play low brass and percussion instruments. And those things, I mean, it really kind of, it's hard to articulate sometimes what to do in those situations. But the more music you listen to as a musician, the more you're going to understand when it's appropriate to, you know, take time with sections and how releases should sound and such like that. So by me playing for them a lot, they start to hear what music sounds like, and then they start to make some of their own decisions based on what I play.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily articulate to them exactly every single time that, you know, they should make one note louder in a phrase or make the tonic perhaps louder. They kind of hear that a lot in what I do, and then they get to kind of give that back to me and repeat it, and then make the same decision in another piece.
Yeah, yeah, and it just seems like they really get it. You know, I mean, not only in this small group, but even when large groups in the concert were playing. Of course, there's no conductor. There's no. I mean, when large group, you would give the release, you know, on the last note. But other than that, you weren't giving anything, and it seemed like. I mean, more so than I hear typically at kids that have been playing only a year, is there was a real attention on their part to how notes ended. You know, I mean, that really, and I'm just wondering, do you think that's just a result of of listening to your models? Or did you actually say, you know, at some point in time or periodically, you know, we're going to talk about how these notes, how you stop them and what they should sound like when they stop?
Yes, I really talk about releases a lot. I mean, releases, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, that's the audience's final impression, and that's how I talk to a kid. I'll say, this is the audience's final impression. I won't say you should release this note because it sounds better. I'll say somebody's going to be listening to you release this note one day, and this is what they're going to want to hear. And I'll give them examples, and they can give them each other examples of good releases. And yeah, I do talk about releases a lot and about ways to treat notes, because it is important. And
yeah.
then through my also, you know, good examples of playing, you know, they'll start to hear, you know, what it should be that they're looking for. I mean, but releases are very important.
Yeah.
So that's not no coincidence.
Yeah.
Would you talk some more about your use of the instruments to model on? Because you do it at the drop of a hat. You have all the instruments right there at your disposal. And it seems to be a major part of your teaching approach. And of course we suggest it, but you know, to what extent teachers are able to pull that off successfully, it varies from one to the next. You do a wonderful job with that. Can you just talk about how you've worked over the years to develop your skills in that area?
Sure. Well, I mean, when you teach young band students, you know, middle school band students, you realize that they don't understand what good tone quality is. I mean, they don't just come in knowing how a trumpet sounds. They may have heard a trumpet on television before, but they don't know how a trumpet sounds. So you need to give them a good example of that, and you can play them a recording, which they may or may not listen to, and may or not know how to listen to that recording and what they're listening for and what they should gain from that. Or my approach to that is just to play it for them. I mean, if they have their band teacher who, you know, they've developed some sort of relationship with, you know, pick up a trumpet and play it, and they can hear firsthand in the room with them what good trumpet tone quality is like, that's much more valuable when they go home to remember what good trumpet tone quality is like than just, having a teacher describe to them, make sure it's more open, make sure it's more resonant. They don't know what those words mean either. So it's really important to me to be able to play every instrument better than all of my kids, any instrument. I mean, I teach up to the 8th grade level, and I know that my knowledge now on every instrument is much higher than an 8th grade level, and I'm kind of happy with that. I don't need to go too much, beyond that, because my time can be, kind of spent elsewhere. But now that I have that knowledge, I feel like I can demonstrate anything that my students need me to. And demonstration, not necessarily by rote, but with a good sound quality, that kind of demonstration, that's really valuable in a learning situation. My first year teaching, and there was a tuba player who said, there's this honor band, audition I'm trying to take, and I have to play this etude, and do you think you could help me with it and maybe play something of it for me? And as being a woodwind player in my particular techniques class in college, I didn't get to touch the tuba. Woodwind players weren't allowed to touch the tubas. We got to play some of the other instruments, but not the tuba. And so having this request from a kid, I realized really quickly that I had to learn how to play the tuba very well. So that was many hours and hours and hours spent on my part learning to play a brass instrument. And for me, to know whether or not I was getting the right tone quality, I just had to ask myself, is this something that I would want my kids to sound like? And if it's, yes, then I'm probably in the right ballpark. And if it's, no, I really don't want my kids to sound like this, maybe my teeth are closed. It was very much a trial and error process for me to learn how to play every instrument and learn how to play well. But now I feel like that any tone quality I demonstrate on any instrument to a student, I'm proficient enough to where they should, work to achieve that same tone quality.
Yeah.
Whether, it's not professional, but it's very good for
Yeah.
a middle school student. And now people who come to my classroom, and they hear my 8th grade trumpet section, they're always amazed at, what a great trumpet section that is. And they always ask me if I play trumpet. And, the answer is no. I played clarinet for, many, many years, but I do play trumpet for them so they can hear what they're supposed to, sound like. And also, beyond that, when you play an instrument for a kid, they pick up on so much other stuff that you do. When I play trombone, how is my hand position, and how are my elbows and my real compressed, or they're looking at all that other stuff that you told them to do and making sure you do it yourself. For me, my first year teaching, I was real sensitive to the fact that I didn't want to tell any student in the band what instrument I majored in, what instrument I played in school, because I thought growing up with my teachers and stuff that if your band director played that instrument, then you were probably going to get more specialized knowledge. Like I may have learned from a clarinet player who's a band director, and that band director always had extra stuff to say about the clarinet and always could tell you more about tuning the clarinet than they could about the French horn. So my students would ask me what I played. I said, I play every instrument, and I had to make that become true. So every time that I picked up the trumpet, they had to believe that I was a trumpet player. In class, every single day, with all of my classes, I just kind of have a shelf next to my podium where I keep one of every instrument, and like maybe a mouthpiece for a tuba. But I have a flute, clarinet, and alto saxophone, and trumpet, and trombone, and a euphonium sitting on the side. And at any given moment, I can pick up an instrument and play it for a kid. And I don't want people to think that I just play the passages for them by rote, because that's not necessarily what happens. Most of the time it's demonstrating a sound quality or an articulation. There's a lot of emphasis on band directors being able to, convey articulations to students by singing and having that talent to sing do dot, dee dot, all those syllables and such. It's so much more valuable though for a teacher to be able to pick up a trumpet and play a staccato note and make it sound really good, because that's going to mean more to the students.
Yeah.
And I've kind of found that out and tried to make that a part of all of my teaching now.